So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are excited for you to join us on our second annual networking event to think about enterprise risk and corporate security. We have a little bit smaller group here than we thought we were. We have like 40 names out there. But I think the nice weather probably had some people saying, like, I'm going to do this from my porch. So we have a very large group of people that are joining us online as well. So we'll be excited to share some of that information out with you. But thank you all for making the trek here tonight. My name's Amy Farrell. I'm the director of the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice and a professor here in the school. It's great to see not only alums here, folks in the industry, faculty members, and students. So hopefully you will have a chance to connect for co-op jobs and networking opportunities. You have a lot of wonderful knowledge in the room from folks. So we are really thrilled about this event, and I think we're going to be lucky to hear this conversation that's going to happen in a little bit that's talking about where the field of security is going, new challenges that are facing the field, and the types of skills and tools that you need in order to be successful to navigate these new challenges and experiences, identifying risk. And you know, we are in the middle of a moment, I think, just to stop and say and kind of recognize where risk is important. Understanding threats, understanding vulnerabilities in communities, and understanding how to manage risk. We see playing out in front of us on a daily basis, from everything that's happening internationally to what is happening just north of us in Maine. So, you know, there will be some conversation tonight that I'm sure will think about the ways that we bring these important practical skills to solving and preventing incidents of crime and violence in workplaces, in public places, and in our communities. Very quickly before we get started, I just wanted to say a few things about what we're doing as a school. When I came in as the director, I was really interested in the fact that so many of our students were doing these amazing co-ops in corporate security and private security and interested in security. And we didn't really have the curriculum to support that work, right? So students would go out on co-op, they would get excited about security. These are amazing opportunities and careers in the field of security. And what we've been trying to do is think, how can we bring that back to create networks with alums where we can build even stronger relationships? And how can we bring that into the curriculum? So at the undergraduate level, we've been developing some new courses in security, and particularly are going to be launching, we hope by next fall, fingers crossed, a dual combined major with the supply chain group in the business school. We're kind of taking it group by group in the business school and supply chain, and thinking about illicit networks and licit networks and how they interact with each other is an area that we're hoping that students will be interested in. At the graduate level, we have a new certificate that will be launched next fall in crime analytics that Professor Pisa, who's here, is going to be talking about, that is specifically going to be providing higher level analytical tools to students to think about risk and crime prevention and security, and giving students some really hard skill training around responding to risk and thinking about crime prevention. We've also been developing with Professor Pasas, who was here somewhere. Where is he? Ah, there you are. A whole series of courses at the graduate level in financial crime. And so we have a new master's financial crime course, and we have an illicit flows course that will be the second iteration of that sort of set of courses that are coming out. So thinking about illicit flows, particularly in manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. So we're really trying to increase the kind of practical skills that we're giving students, not only to learn, you know, theoretical concepts, analytical tools, and to think about how those are addressing real world problems in the security field today. So I look forward to talking to you more about what we need and where we need to be going in terms of new risks and how we bring that into our curriculum so that Northeastern can continue being a leader in this space and bringing new generations of students into this amazing profession. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, I think next.
Is this working now?
Yeah, okay, great.
Thanks, Amy. Okay. So, first off, why are we here? Building skills to navigate challenges in enterprise risk and security. I'm in the right place. Okay. My name is Ryan DiStefano. I am in class of 02, 03, and then online MBA later in my career. So 3 degrees from Northeastern, so I'm very proud to be here, proud to help and be a part of this community. I was one of those students that started out as a co-op here that was getting exposed to some things in corporate security that was a little bit outside what the criminology and criminal justice program at the time was teaching me, and I got excited about a career in corporate security. And I'm very proud to see what the university is doing to try to continue to advance and mature and talk about things like this and bring different programming for kids like me. That was 20 plus years ago. So I am the director of corporate security for Keurig Dr. Pepper. Been there for 2 years. Prior to that, I had 15 years with Procter & Gamble. Started my career here at Gillette before they were merged with Procter & Gamble. One of my first assignments was evacuating the Prudential Tower on 9/11 because we had 20 floors in the Prudential Tower high-rise during that time. So that's how I started my career in security, and here we are today. So I don't want to go further about myself. I'd like my panel to introduce themselves. And what we've asked them to do actually is I'm going to be moderating tonight, just asking some kind of thought-provoking questions, allowing them to kind of answer off each other. And we have a few, and then we'll save some time at the end for some audience Q&A as well. But to open up, just give a brief introduction about themselves. And we also thought during that introduction, maybe talk a little bit about what's changed in the industry since you started. What are some of the challenges you're seeing today versus maybe some of the challenges you saw when you were starting out in the industry? So without further ado, we'll start with my friend here, Mr. Safi.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is a privilege, really, to speak to you. My name is Kushal Safi, and I am the Director of Global Safety here at Northeastern. I work for the police department and underneath the general counsel. And I've been here since 2014. Before that, I was in the agency, or as my friend here calls it, the company. And I was doing some work on the counterintelligence side, supporting U.S. missions overseas, mostly against the Iran target, which we now know is of interest again to the U.S. government. So it's interesting times. When I started my career back in 2002, was right after 9/11. We had a very unsophisticated government entity on the counterterrorism side. We got kind of caught, with our flat-footed on with the 9/11 terror attacks. And I think from then until now, we've really built, a rather robust interagency cooperation system where, locals work directly with the federal government. A lot of the information that we're using now is data-driven. It's moved from kind of the pen and pencil paper stuff that we were doing back in, the early 2000s to real, hard data collection, analyzing that data, and really needing to have those hard skills in order to, advance your careers moving forward. So I think with that, my one piece of advice always is, get those hard skills, but don't forget about the soft skills, because you can't really be an intelligence officer without, being charming and going out there and making a lot of friends. So with that, I'll pass along to my colleague.
Hi, everyone. I struggle with microphones more than I should. Do it like this or like this? So apologies to everyone online who I'm probably going to be in and out on the feed. Eric Pisa, aspiring stand-up comedian and also professor of criminology and criminal justice here at Northeastern. Also the director of crime analysis initiatives, and I co-direct the crime prevention lab. Only my second year at Northeastern, so I'm still fairly new here. Before coming here, I spent 9 years at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in Manhattan on the faculty. Prior to that, I spent 7 years as the Geographic Information Systems Specialist for the Newark, New Jersey Police Department. GIS Specialist for short, pretty much the police nerd, right? So before I was an academic nerd, I was just a police nerd. Was simultaneously getting my PhD from Rutgers University at that time, and when I finished my PhD, it was time to not be a municipal police employee anymore. My research, though, is in direct partnership with police agencies around the country. Pretty much all of my work focuses on risk assessment, predictive analytics, kind of identifying crime problems, identifying crime patterns, trying to assist the police department in understanding, and hopefully also working with the police departments to develop some type of program or intervention that's meant to hopefully, again, rectify those types of problems. So when I think back to when I was a municipal police employee to today, what has changed? I think the biggest thing has changed is that intelligence analysis, crime analysis, whatever we want to call it, data analytics is no longer niche, right? If we take an honest look of what we expect law enforcement to do today, what the public expects law enforcement to do today, they can't do it effectively without strong analytical capabilities, right? I mean, and that wasn't necessarily true back then, or at least it wasn't widely recognized when I first started. The challenge, though, is that resources for these types of positions and resources for this type of work haven't exactly increased in tangent with the demand for it, right? So I think that there's an opportunity for places like Northeastern who are taking a lead in providing the tangible skills for the next wave of intelligence and crime analysts. And I'll stop there before I go any further.
Well, hi, everyone. Ryan Dunn. I think he can hear me. So I'm a 2003 graduate of Northeastern. Currently at Takeda, pharmaceutical company based in Tokyo, but have a large presence here in Massachusetts. Been there for 14 years. I think when I talk about where the industry has gone, a good example would be two of my first co-ops at Northeastern. So how I got into private security was through a guard force company, very basic, what we used for technology back then. We had an access control system and people had badges. We had cameras that had VHS tapes. We had a bunch of multiplexers, if you probably don't know what that is, that people watched and had to actually see what had happened to catch it. To fast forward now, we have advanced analytics built into the cameras, and you can have tens of thousands of cameras, and only the ones that you need to respond to that see an anomaly, a behavior that's not normal, or something that you teach it through machine learning that you want to capture, someone holding a door open. So the amount of man hours that have been reduced by that is just unbelievable, and that's just one small technology change in our industry. So my second co-op was crime analysis at Somerville Police Department. And we actually used a system, MapInfo, back then. So we were using some form of analytics, which led into my current role. I used that. I was like, well, I do have, when applying for my new role, I was like, I do have some data analytics background. So I went back to that day. But now looking at the tools that we have in place today, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And there's so much more that we can leverage. But I think really Northeastern and other people coming into this workforce, you grew up with a lot of this technology, so I think you're going to bring so much more to the table, and you're going to have, you know, not just the hard skills, but soft skills, and you're going to teach some people like me who basically learned all of this stuff in the past 5 years, you know, what I don't know. So that combination between, you know, people who understand this technology much better, grew up with it, and then people who have, you know, more business experience or maybe know the industries better to start, I think combined is going to really improve, you know, the overall security risk management that teams can provide. So I'm excited to see the offerings, and I think I may sign up for some courses in the future.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. I am Rebecca Scorzato. I'm a partner with Control Risks. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I am an alum from '03. Somehow, I don't know, like Ryan and I work together all the time now, yet we didn't know each other when we were in school. I don't know how that happened. But I did have a very similar sort of start to the other Ryan, who is moderating. We both started in Gillette, so heritage along with Tim and others in this room. So for those of you who don't know Control Risks, I know some of you are familiar. Michelle and I are both from Control Risks, Specialist Risk Consultancy. We were established about 50 years ago as an acute kidnap for ransom response firm. And that's how a lot of companies will know us, but it's a very, very small part of what we still do today, probably about 5% of our global business, headquartered in London, 36 offices globally. Sort of broadly speaking, what I do in crisis and security consulting is advisory to security organizations. What Michelle does is a bit different, and she'll talk about it, but more in the investigation and technology space. And then we have a forward-looking political risk team. A lot of other things, but that's sort of generally what it is. So I've been with the firm for 14 years, and prior to that, worked for 5 years for the federal government. And so when I think about sort of what's changed, I think there's two things to mention. But when I graduated Northeastern in '03, it was during the time of this concept of convergence between data security, information security, and physical security. And I thought to myself, okay, I need to better equip myself with some hard skills around data protection that at the time I didn't necessarily get from the college, probably because I wasn't taking the right courses. But I decided to go and get a master's degree at Carnegie Mellon, and I have a cybersecurity degree from there. It's interesting. I learned all about coding and encryption, algorithms, all of this. But then I also learned about how to develop quantitative risk models and management science and Excel. And if I think about the skills that I use from that degree, I mean, I'm not doing any coding. No one wants me doing any coding, right? But those sort of more fundamental hard skills in how do you program in Excel, how do you develop quantitative risk models are ones that I still use today. And when I look at sort of talent coming in, those are the types of hard skills that we're really looking for. And I think it's still really critical that security professionals understand data protection, at least fundamental concepts. But the big change, I would say, in the past 5 years is to use that data that security or other organizations are collecting, and that real desire to harness that data to tell a data story for two sort of main purposes. One is taking the data that security sort of has and using it to deliver insights back to the business. So whether that is through a risk and intelligence program like sort of Ryan has at Takeda, or whether it's through proactive horizon scanning that I know sort of Safi does, how can you deliver insights back to the business to enable them to be more proactive, strategic, and then ultimately getting the security department at the table for some of those strategic business decisions. And I think the other thing that we do a lot of work in control risks is helping organizations to use that data that they collect to develop metrics for security organizations so we can start to quantify the value that security is bringing to the rest of the organization. So you can understand sort of the return on investment, because it's hard to quantify, right? It's always challenging to say how much money were we able to save and loss and whatnot. So we do a lot of work in developing these quantitative risk models and developing digital dashboards for security organizations so that they can, on an ongoing basis, really show those metrics about the value that they're bringing. And the skill sets that we're looking for in order to develop those types of models are a bit different, right? It's that developing quantitative risk models, Power BI, Tableau, how do we visualize, and working closely with Michelle's team, what she's going to talk about shortly. And I don't necessarily have those skills, right? And again, looking for people are really teaching me things, but those are the skills when I'm recruiting now that I'm really looking out for. Like, how able are you to bring that skill set to our consulting projects and ultimately to control risks clients? The other thing, just to pivot a bit, that I want to at least call out here in terms of the change from when I started to now is looking at diversity. And I would say when I started in this field over 20 years ago, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me, right? And I would say specifically gender diversity. And I think we can see by looking around the room that has changed, and I think that's fantastic, right? Looking at the panel and looking at you all. One of the things that I'm quite proud of at Control Risk is that we've now established a co-op program, and I'm looking at, please, Jada and Chloe, current and former co-op of ours. So we've have a co-op program, and we have quite a pool of junior consultants now that are coming from the college. And I think we have 9 now. They all happen to be women. We're not exclusively, I think it is me. So sorry. So we're not exclusively looking for women, but I think it does speaks to the talent pool that exists now within the security environment and from the college, and I feel quite proud of that, and I think it's an exciting change.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name's Michelle Wiener. As Rebecca said, I'm also a partner with Control Risk. We've talked so much about data. I am what we would call an outlier in this business on the panel, and that's because I am not a Northeastern graduate, nor do I practice in the security field. So I head Control Risk, Discovery and Data Insights practice, but from a background perspective, my subject matter expertise, I'm a lawyer by education. I specialize really in white-collar crime. So what Amy was talking about when it comes to economic and financial crime, corruption, global corruption, antitrust matters, and fraud. So financial fraud and other types of fraud. So my perspective is slightly different. It's a different risk discipline. It certainly, though, comes under enterprise risk and is something for students in particular. From a risk discipline, it is what has also changed. In my perspective from the business. You can no longer just be an expert in security. You have to understand from an enterprise perspective what your stakeholders that are sitting next to you, what their risk disciplines, how that impacts your business as well. And so that overlap between risk disciplines for students, I think the need to maybe go deep in your own area of expertise where you find your passion, but you need to be able to play across risk disciplines as well. And the other piece of what I think has changed, and I've been in consulting now for 30 years across 3 firms, including in an in-house legal role as well. The other thing that's changed is speed. Like, I cannot underestimate for you how quickly decision-making in today's business world needs to happen. And so having the right data at your hands is great, but what you really need is to be able to quickly draw what's really valuable from that data. And we'll talk a little bit about reliability and assurance of data that you're analyzing as well, because people are going to make decisions about this. They're going to act on it. And so for students thinking about the speed at which we all operate within a business world, I don't think it's going to slow down, but that has changed significantly. I remember when I first started in my first job, you would have weeks to respond. There wasn't even email. Like, people were still sending faxes. And so like this, just the speed of business and the speed of decision making, I think impacts all of us no matter what role you're in. So my perspective might be a little bit different, but hopefully valuable to you as students too, because if you are in a program like the one that Northeastern's running, it is the kind of background and for new hires that I'm looking for as well, but maybe from a different perspective than just a traditional security background. The other thing that I think that's changed a bit too, and someone touched on this as well from a globalization standpoint, is I deal mostly with US regulators, the Department of Justice, the SEC, and the FBI. And that's only one regulatory picture now. The globe has become a much smaller place. And so if you're running a global business like Takeda and what Ryan has to deal with, it's not just the US regulators you have to deal with. You have to deal with active global regulation too. And so being able to act locally but think globally, because risk plays out very differently depending on where in the world you are. So having a global perspective is another thing that I'm also looking for in my students. Do you speak a foreign language? That can be an amazingly helpful skill when I have a data set that's in another language too. So language skills and things that you might not think about being relevant in a criminology context can be really, really important, just depending on where in the world I'm working when I'm doing my hiring cycle as well. Just a couple extra thoughts. Ryan, I'll turn back over to you.
Thank you. Great job. I think really good introductions. Appreciate the challenges. Definitely sense a theme that's going to lead into my next question. I think the only thing I'll add on to what the panelists said is the concept of always on, I think, is a little bit different now than it was 20 years ago. With that speed of information and with the technology and device at fingertips, that people in our profession, there's a culture, there's an expectation of an always on and an always respond, whatever type of day it is, and so forth. So we'll get into how that kind of impacts crisis management in your teams and things like that. But I do think that's another thing that's probably changed over the past 25 years or so. So I think the theme that I heard pretty much from everybody is technology. is one of the skills that is needed to kind of continue to emerge and build as a hard skill set. So Ryan, I'm going to start with you, in your role, how you're using technology or data today, and maybe some of the pitfalls or challenges with technology and data, and maybe we can build on top of that.
Yeah, so I think I missed earlier that I've been in my current role in risk intelligence and data analytics for 2 years. So the reason my role was created was we had a bunch of partners that were providing us risk event data, and we were looking at it through their lens of where they saw different threats in different regions and how it impacted our company. We had other data sets internally where we were seeing, incident reports of things that we knew impacted our company, and other metrics about our company. So we had that, and then we had open source data. So there's other data that think tanks and NGOs and others make accessible now online, which was never there before. So you have all this data that gives you a better picture of what your exposure is, and then the view is, well, you're telling us what the trends have been. Well, what's next? What's on the horizon? What does the data show? Like, where should we be paying attention to? And then what should we be doing about it? So what we've really been doing is trying to take in all this data and pull what the real impact and things that we can control and provide those insights to the business. Who knows, they have their own, appetite for risk or what they think are the most concerning things to the business. So we need to do that, at a moment's notice. So we could do something delivered to them on a regular basis, or it could be ad hoc. They'd say, you know what, we want to know right now, we want to know what's the top 5 risks that's going to impact us. And some of them may be physical security risks, but there could be other things we see that are kind of outside of our wheelhouse. They could be regulatory risks. Could be a presidential election coming up where we said, well, if this other party wins, there's some other risks outside of civil unrest or something that's really a traditional security scope. So really, I've seen that, and I see that it continuing to go that way, where the security professionals, if you have that business understanding, you have access to all these different data sources, and you have the people with technical skills that can use programming languages, you can really pull more insights, move faster, provide specific intel for your company to your leaders, and then you're going to build trust with them. They're going to come back to you and ask for more. So I think that's the journey I see going, and that's just some of the data that we're using, and we're going to continue to move forward with that. Another one is some tools that we have out there. Some people can try to build their own in-house tools, but you can get programs that look at sentiment. So it's a lot of activity on social media. Some of it, is just noise that you don't need to be concerned with. Some of it are actual threats. But tools out there that can get overall sentiment, volume of concerning themes or tones. So that technology there, I think, is pretty new, or at least new to me. But it's really exciting to be able to see that and to be kind of notified to that, because there are things that someone can't sit and monitor Twitter or other things and really see this. A person can't do it. A machine can do it. So that's like another technology that we're incorporating into our risk models that I think is really exciting. And I think, people coming into the industry, for me, I have to learn, from a firehouse trying to catch up. But people who are able to learn these things in school and grow up with these programs, I think are going to be, it's going to be exciting to see what other people are doing in the years to come.
I want to just add one thing, Ryan, because I think you're absolutely right from my perspective too. And in my world, we think about it about structured data sources versus unstructured data sources. So I think, and maybe you will agree, since you talked about predictive analytics, when it comes to structured data, anything that lives in a database, financial information being the easiest one, crime data is mostly structured data. We've kind of cracked the code on how to analyze that data and how to apply analytics to it. And we moved into the space of being able to actually predict what's going to happen if you have a good, rich, structured data set. It's the unstructured data. And when you think about unstructured data, all of our emails are unstructured data. All of our communications on Twitter, video is unstructured data. And I think it is a place that you need to think about the business moving if you're a student or if you're studying, because getting the right information from unstructured data, understanding sentiment. And the example I always use is a Twitter post that says, "You're killing me, Elon Musk," versus "I'm going to kill you, Elon Musk." It's a very slight language difference. And how can you use an unstructured data source to determine what your threat environment really looks like? And the scale, you cannot have humans doing that. You would need piles and hundreds of people just reviewing Twitter feeds. The scale is what creates such a challenge for those of us that are tasked with decision making. The scale of the number of posts just on Twitter alone would break kind of any analytics team. And to make it cost effective, you have to rely on technology. And so I think if we talk about where the business and where business is going and where you should be thinking about kind of like what is yet to be cracked, unstructured data is really the component. When we crack that and you bring the two together, structured analytics and unstructured analytics, that's when magic's really going to happen. We're not there yet.
Professor,
Yeah,
you look like you want to say something.
One quick point. I love the observation about us being awash in unstructured data that is difficult to analyze. So from a local municipal government perspective and from a policing perspective, if we take an honest look at the last 20 years, I think it's easy to kind of identify body-worn cameras as the reform, right? That's, probably the most popular police reform of the last few decades, right? Pretty much every mid-sized police department has invested in body cameras. We're awash in unstructured body camera video, right? Think about the terabytes and terabytes and terabytes that get generated every single day, and that no one's really looking at, right? The only time we look at that data in policing is when something bad has happened, right? When someone complains about an officer, when we have an ugly use of force situation. So essentially, right, I mean, we need to get to that in policing too, to figure out how to actually systematically analyze that unstructured data to prevent those bad things from happening.
So one additional point. Sorry,
I was going
Ryan.
to you anyway.
Yeah, I was going to
going to you
say
anyway.
I'm coming in hot. So yeah, I totally agree. The issues with the unstructured data and being able to coalesce and interpret what's coming out of that data also takes kind of the human touch, right? So you need to understand the culture of certain civilizations that are operating around the world. That if a person in the U.S. is trying to endeavor into say for example the Middle East or North Africa, and they're like, oh, I can see all these things happening. What does this ultimately mean? If you don't have a really good understanding or grasp of the culture that operates within those areas, it's going to be difficult to sift through that information, or it's going to be difficult for you to come out with a full picture of the data that's unstructured, right? So when you're going out, you're looking for those people that have that cultural acumen, that understanding of how the streets of certain countries work. And if you can get that grasp of the streets, then you're able to build that bigger picture with all the unstructured data compiled on, because now I'm talking about stacking skill sets, right? So you're stacking the skill set of the structured data, you stack the skill set of the unstructured data, you have some cultural familiarity, you get networks of people that understand what's going on in the area, you bounce ideas off of them, and that's how you build your complete picture and the complete kind of predictive analysis piece that you're saying, oh yeah, this is going to get really bad and it's going to get really bad fast. And that's really what the US government does on a regular basis when they have their their groups at the embassies, local national investigators that are working for the embassies, and really their networks of atmospheric reporters and networks of other people that are out there being courted by the US government.
One more thing.
I don't have to say anything.
We're
I'll
gonna
just
keep
keep
going.
watching.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Professor. There you go. So actually, Safi, I was going to turn it to you anyway. I think that the unstructured data, structured data conversation is great. Leading to talking a little bit about those soft skills, right? Because you can have data sets are great. You have confounding variables. You have all this other stuff, and you have speed of information. You have a breadth of information. What do you do with the information? So can you talk, there's nothing structured about college students studying abroad and the stuff that you have to deal with on a regular basis, not just students, we know the professors too. But the stuff that you have to deal with is not very structured. And a lot of the intelligence, a lot of the information you have to sort through and figure out how to do with it. So you can talk a little more specifically about the skills you're looking for, the data you're using, the technology you're using to kind of help protect your students and your staff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we at Northeastern, we have a fairly mature international or global safety office. We have two wonderful people that work in my office. Alyssa's back there, and JJ's also part of the office too. What we look at is, the regular stuff that most other people are looking at. Your controlled risks, information that's coming out of, their data sets, predictive analysis, also threat analysis that comes out. Your State Department advisories. We try to go outside of the U.S. government, look at the UK's advisories. If you're doing international risk management, the UK's maps are the best. I'm just going to throw it out there. So we look at all the general stuff, right? So we're getting all the same feeds that everybody else is getting, but what differentiates us from the others, right? So I would say that our co-op program and our co-op employers and our faculty, believe it or not, even though you people want to make fun of the faculty, they're great. I'm not pointing at him. I'm just saying that the faculty members are our experts, right? They're the people that are out there, especially in the IR field or the international relations, we still call it that, and the folks that are in global studies, the people that are going out and collecting information and bringing it back. I would say we would have been, I'd still say we would have been successful, but we wouldn't have been as successful during the COVID pandemic if it wasn't for Alex Vespignani and the work that Alex was doing with the U.S. government and leadership here at Northeastern that said, we need to bring all of these groups together. And one of those groups was my office, and we were able to then really quickly, determine that this was a major event that may not have been getting the media attention in January and February, when Alex was really ringing the alarm bells for everybody to say, hey, look, this is going to be a big problem. We were able to get in front of that. So it's the soft skills of building the networks, like building trust in others, realizing that others have an expertise that they can give you. So often I tell people, I am not the smartest person in the room. Alyssa probably will agree with that. I often tell people, I write with a crayon and then I eat it afterwards. But I do trust a lot of people that are the experts. And what I do is I build the networks. I hope that I build trust with them, that I'm not going to out them or not going to do work counter to what their interests are. But ultimately, it's building that network, building your support structures, identifying the people that can help, offering your own help to other people. And then when you build all these networks, you build that trust, and you're ultimately sharing information. And really, that's what it's all about. Is none of us are an expert by ourselves. We're really an expert when you bring everybody together. And that's, we could talk about the data, we could talk about all the other pieces, but I really want to go back to the human aspect of it. I can do a lot of data work. Somebody else can do a lot of data work. We can combine that data, and our efforts are that much more multiplied.
Professor Pisa, can you kind of expand on that, the importance of dynamic data, skill building, kind of as we've been talking here, and some of the importance of that?
Yeah, sure. What was the original question, though? Because I was and for the record, college professors, we're unstructured data personified.
Yeah,
so
no problem. So we talked a little
yeah.
bit about the skills that are necessary for students to have,
Yes,
soft
yeah,
and
that's right.
hard, and dynamic skill building on top of that. Can you just, from your perspective on what kind of students should be looking for or needing to bring to kind of some of the concepts we've been talking about?
Thank you. Well, I think it's less what students should be looking for, and it's what departments should be offering, right? I mean, students are looking for, what's on the course catalog, and if we're putting the wrong courses on the course catalog, we're doing students a disservice. And I think, I was going to say social sciences, but I'll pick just on criminology programs. I think criminology programs for a long time have been teaching, frankly, the wrong classes to our students, right? We've been heavy on theory. We've been heavy on traditional research. When it comes time for most places, we're not guilty of this in Northeastern, right? But when it comes time for applied certificate programs, right, we take as a field those normal classes and we just add on a final crime analysis class or a final intelligence class, right? And essentially we expect students to pick up the hard skills or soft skills necessary to go in the field. with highly academic focused training, right? That's a disservice, right? And what I'm excited about being here in Northeastern, not to make this a Northeastern commercial, though I guess at the end of the day this is a Northeastern commercial, is we're recognizing that we have a need that if we want to train the future intelligence analyst, crime analyst, data analyst, we have to kind of step back and start from scratch almost, right? So the crime analysis certificate that Amy was mentioning before, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. We're taking a hard look at what do employers expect of data analysts? What do employers expect, be it in the private sector or the public sector, of crime and intelligence analysts, right? And we're thinking from that lens. Because again, like a lot of conversations I have with crime analysis managers, with police leadership around the country is, they hire very impressive looking criminology students, right? They come out with some pretty impressive looking degrees, and they don't know how to work with unstructured data, right? They don't know how to take messy real world data and actually use it and convert it into a usable format. They're very good on, I'm not sure if this is a soft skill or not, right? But they're very good at pontificating academically and kind of telling you what the research says about problems. And they're not as good at generating the actual actionable intelligence. Right? So, so I think, again, I think of it less of like what the students should be looking for and what universities should be offering, right? And to me, I think more of a focus on these hard, actionable, tangible skills are critical. And it's critical on all levels too, right? So I think this is critical in undergraduate education, it's critical in master's level education. And to be perfectly frank, I think if we're being honest about the state of higher education, I think it's going to become even more critical on the doctoral level, right? To be perfectly frank, right, in 10 years, I'm not entirely sure there's going to be as many good traditional academic jobs for all of the people we're training with PhDs, right? So I also think there's going to be a room to expand what a PhD means, right? And I think equipping PhDs more with these types of hard skills are also in the best interest of our future PhD students' career prospects as well.
Thank you. Ryan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I have two program areas, risk intelligence and data analytics. So I kind of talk about both, but so risk intelligence, the people still need to have the theory, the techniques, the methodologies, all of that down pat. I want them to put in all the research, and I want it to be credible intelligence. And it may be, they may write me something that's 10 pages long, 20 pages long. The people we're going to deliver it to, maybe 20 years ago, they'd have time to read that and they'd want to, but they really just want, a paragraph with like 5 things that they need to know and consider, the key intelligence questions. So I think you still need to have the education standpoint and have those skills, but for me, you really need to get it down to the point where you have to be able to deliver it to the audience in a very concise manner. You need to be able to verbally brief it and talk to them, if you have 30 seconds of their time where they're like, all right, tell me what I need to know. I mean, they have other things that are more important unless you're telling them that the world's going to end. On the data scientist end, I think you need all of those coding skills, programming skills. But for me, and I don't have those, but what I need is just the actual visuals and the actual insights from the data. And that's all I can give to most of the executives I'm presenting to. It's like one page. They're like, I'm going to scan it on my iPhone. Like, I'm not going to be at the laptop. Like, most of the time they're traveling or at home. Like, they want to be able to scan quickly and pull out, in as few seconds as possible what they really need to know. So I think that's kind of the challenge. And I've lived it through the past 2 years of transitioning from operations into this. But it's where everything's going. I don't think it's going to change that you need to be delivering quickly. So I think those skills, if you can learn them in the university, way better off. Or if you get them through an internship, that's just as good. But it's got to happen somewhere. Otherwise, you're going to be learning on the job, which which is always more challenging.
I love that you talked about the brevity of concise information, because I feel like when I went through college, it was about you need to write the 20-page paper, the 25-page paper, and I had to rethink all that when I went into corporate. And I'm still struggling today with my bosses saying you got too much in this email or too much in this alert. You know, you gotta make it much more brief. Michelle, I was actually going to go to you next, but if you wanted to comment on that first, I have a different question for you.
So maybe the outlier, maybe a bit of a naysayer too. I'm concerned that we've communicated to students in the room that might not have a data science degree to match your criminology degree, that you've somehow gotten it all wrong and you need to go back and start over again. That is not the case. I do think data skills are going to be important no matter what industry you're going into, but to me, that can be learned. It can be trained on the job. What is much harder to train on the job is presentation skills, an investigative mindset, interviewing skills, softer skills. I'll take those over somebody that can code but can't speak to a human being any day, all day long, because I know you can learn that. You're smart. My teenagers learned it really, really quickly. You can be almost self-taught on that. You certainly can learn it on the job. We train. We provide an amazing amount of training for our data analysts in how to interrogate data. So yes, I think it's important. I think it's important whether you're a criminology major. I don't care what your major is. I think data skills are important. Maybe it's because it's just my world, like it is your world as well. It's what we're looking for in hires. But don't lose sight of softer skills that will really matter even when you're interviewing as well, because none of us had data skills when we graduated. We've had to learn it, but it was founded in a very solid soft skills basis that you need. And so that is really, I think it gets underestimated in today's business world. And when you are going out in interviewing, don't think that you're somehow less because you don't have a dual degree in data science, because that is not necessarily what is going to end up landing you your first job. And once you have experience with it, you can build those skills.
Great points. Michelle, can we stay with you? I want to flip the conversation a little bit to talk about the pitfalls of data and technology and the challenges or the watch-outs. And I think we talked a little bit about, regulatory concerns and issues. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that. And then a few follow-up questions on just the reverse of the good that data can bring us.
So on the pitfalls of data, I think what keeps me up at night stems from, I have a statistician on my team. And I had a large data set that we were analyzing. We're facing the regulator. And the statistician came to me and said, well, what do you want the data to say? And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a problem. So it is, I think, the ethical handling of data in our world for business decisions, when you're in front of a regulator, in particular, when you're in front of the FBI as an example, you gotta be really sure that the information that you're presenting and drawing from that data is reliable. You also need to think about ethical use of data because it has a people impact, and that's one of the things we haven't talked about. So threat data has a people impact, whether your people are your employees. In my world, the example that I always like to give to about impact on data when we're looking at corruption in particular. So corruption happens in very, very vulnerable populations in particular. Outside of the United States in particular, imagine having to bribe a teacher to get your child into kindergarten. Okay, that's problematic on a world stage. Imagine when that corruption is concrete supplies on a large bridge that millions of people are going to travel over every day. So data has impact in ways that ethics gets raised very much. And that intersection for me of how we're using data and making sure that the insights we're drawing from it are reliable, and we've baked into that analysis an ethical component for all of us, I think, in this business. It's really, really critical. I think the good thing is the next generation to come into business globally will have been raised on ethical concerns with use of data. I actually was going to time us. We've done really well. I was going to say, how long is it going to take us before someone uses the word AI in this panel? And no one has, and we're 57 minutes in. It's the first time. I speak all the time, and it's like within the first minute of every presentation I've been on recently, someone's used the word AI. I'm going to be the one that does it this time. But the notion of the use of artificial intelligence and what is right now just really generative AI. So, but the next state evolution of that kind of data analysis and its applicability to making decisions about who's a threat actor, who's a criminal, who's engaged in an act of war, like those are real ethical ways that data is going to impact our business. And I think the onus is going to be on you, the students and the next generation, to make sure we get that right globally. And that's a big ask, right? Like I don't think my generation had an ask of that magnitude and that size. So for me, that's really, I think, the biggest challenge that we're going to face and are facing with data. It's a big one to answer. There's no easy button with that one from my perspective.
Way to open the floodgates for us, Michelle.
Sorry.
Ryan, I was going to go to you next. Can we talk a little bit about data and reliability of data and the challenges there? How, the pressure for speed of information also conflicts with reliability and accuracy,
Yeah.
and how you think through that a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to talk about AI, but Michelle bet me that someone would say it within 6 minutes. But I want to just jump on that for 1 second. I mean, there are a lot of ethical considerations with Gen AI, but I think there's also, I've been learning daily from people who are much more skilled in using these tools than I am, of just all the efficiencies that you can pull out of it. And with intelligence analysis, there's ways that you can use it where you're not coming to conclusions, you're just speeding up your gathering of data and ensuring you're not missing something in your analysis. So if you're using it for efficiency means like that without making actual judgments, I think it's fascinating how much speed it's gonna reduce in time to get to actually coming to your hypotheses and building up support for it. So I actually can't recall exactly what the question was that I was supposed to answer, Ryan.
Exactly. So it was kind of building on that
misinformation.
concept, kind of disinformation,
Yeah.
speed of intelligence, and how it kind of competes with that sometimes, and how you got to get it
Yeah.
right, but you also got to be careful what you
Yeah,
trust.
and I think we've unfortunately have a few examples of that during the past few weeks where information from sources that normally people would say are reliable, and you might just take anything you get from there and make decisions upon it, turn out that there's contrary opinions and there's different sources, and then people are questioning what the actual truth is. Or even today, where there was, people are trying to do the right thing and report that, a vehicle was spotted coming into Massachusetts. So it's things like that where, as security professionals, from a crisis management, emergency management perspective, you got to be careful with what you do with this information. Some of it may be, put out there as propaganda, or some of it may be incidental. It's just information that's out there and it's picked up by what you think are reliable sources, and you just got to, hold back before, making a decision if it's not immediately life-threatening. Like, you have to weigh that. But if you're going to be reporting out things, you got to be careful about, what you're taking in, what you're, feeding back in with the purpose of trying to protect your organization. So I think that's very scary that there's, all this data out there and people react so quickly to it. So a perception can be one thing when the reality is something different. And if that changes later, then it may be too late, because perception, people are already believing what they've seen. So yeah, I think it's certainly a concern out there. Yeah, and if
No,
I
that's
know,
good.
I think Safi will probably
Yeah,
have
Safi
some
was-
more to add
Go
on
right
to
ahead.
that.
Yeah, I'd also say there's also a risk in overanalysis. So we saw early on in the war in Ukraine, the run up to the war, a lot of trusted sources were saying, there's going to be a war. The Russians are going to invade. there was some folks that were starting to, analyze the situation and say, no, there's no way that the Russians are going to invade. And there's one group that actually said, no, they're never going to invade. That goes against every theory of war that basically is out there, right? If you mass a large army on a border and you feed a large army on a border and you tell everybody you're going to invade a country, you're going to invade a country, right? So by overanalyzing the situation, one group was very adamant that they said Russia will never invade. And they got their clients to agree to this and probably put a ton of people at risk after there was a large breadth of information that the world community was operating on that said, yeah, Russia's absolutely invading Ukraine. So it really takes that point where kind of a two-sided coin, right? If you have a gut instinct and there's a lot of trusted sources that are saying that something is going to happen, I would trust that situation, that it's probably going to happen, or at least build a plan of action that something's going to happen. And then the other side is, because they overanalyze, and this is my opinion, this organization overanalyzed a lot of the data and they said, well, they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting, so there's no way they're going to invade. They convinced themselves that they had an alternate theory that was going to be the theory that was going to win the day. And ultimately, they now, and I'm not going to name the organization, they are walking away with a lot of egg on their face.
Yeah. Good segue to my last kind of topic. I want to get Rebecca involved here. Because intelligence, data, it's all great, but things happen, right? The crisis will happen, or it does happen, whether or not we saw it coming or we didn't see it coming, because of good data or good intelligence. So can we talk a little bit about crisis management, because it is a huge skill set that our industry needs to have related to enterprise risk and resilience, and I know you do a lot in this space, Rebecca. So could you just talk a little bit about the core skills in crisis management, and then what you have to deal with as a professional, and how do you help kind of manage through that?
Sure.
nowadays?
So I'll try. This is the easiest thing for me to talk about, because those of you who know me well know this is actually my day job. So for me, really the past 14 years, I've built my career around helping organizations to prepare for how to respond to crisis. So I do a lot of training and exercise, sort of simulations with teams, getting them ready right during peacetime to practice how they would respond to a crisis event. So I think it definitely takes a certain skill set. It's really important to train and exercise with the team, so that team is familiar with how to work together when they face an actual crisis. But from a practitioner perspective, we spend sort of 80% of our time planning and maybe 20% of our time actually responding to crisis. So it tends to be a company will say, hey, we have this major problem. Partnering with Michelle sometimes, like we've got this major corruption, right? That's a crisis for us. So we actually jump in and roll up our sleeves and help. And I think for me and for members of the team, I think this is an area where just being in the trenches and experience is really, really critical. And in fact, members of my team that spend a lot of time doing the planning, I really encourage them to actually have in-house roles, so that either with other companies, or we have a sort of embedded consulting business where they sit at client site, because I really feel like you need to go through working through a crisis a few times to have some comfort and familiarity doing it. So I think if you can do that to any extent, watching it in your co-op roles, I think is great, or in the sort of early parts of your career. And I think one thing that we had talked about before, Ryan, was like sort of concept of burnout, which happens, and that nature of always being on. I think that's really challenging in our industry overall, is that to advance and to be good, you need to be responsive. That's kind of the whole point, right, of the risk and security function, is to be there to respond to situations when they occur. Which means that on Friday night, when you get the call after you've had a drink that something's going on, you jump on it, right? You respond to that situation. But I think it's really important, and from a preparedness perspective, we talk about the need to have alternates and to cycle out when you're getting tired. But it is really important from a personal resilience perspective to also understand, hey, it's Friday night. I might be able to work on that on Friday night, but at what point do I need to say, hey, okay, no, I need to take a step away? I said to a couple of folks when we were coming in this morning, like, I took last week off completely because I knew I traveled 4 weeks in a row and I was completely burnt out. So I said, I know for my own personal resilience, I need to take this time away because I've got my sort of eye off the ball. And it's really important when you're in a crisis because decisions are extremely critical and they're impactful. And if you make a mistake because you're tired, it's going to be even more concerning. So I think it's important to know that and to recognize the signs that other people on your team might be having that burnout as well.
I'd just
wanna
like to
follow
add, I think it's on both the employee and the manager and the team to have a culture to build that where people can speak up. Because the person who's in the lead, in the trenches, who's really experiencing it, if they don't feel like they can speak up and ask for help or support, or there's no one who's going to listen, then they're not going to. And if the manager isn't asking the employee genuinely, like, how are you doing? I know you're going through this incredibly stressful situation, then it's just going to continue. And at some point, there's either going to be mistakes made or the person's going to leave the position. And I think you kind of see that a lot with people who are in, that sole crisis management role for an extended period of time, and it's just one after the other. So I think you really have to be honest with each other. And as a manager, you definitely have to, talk to those employees and do whatever you can. If it means, going up, a rung and telling management that, it's just, we don't have the capacity to continue this. Because some crises are over in 48 hours, and then there's others that go on for a year or two. But at some point, it's a different part of the crisis. And I know with Ukraine, we've switched out lead people 3 or 4 times who have been part of that team. And it's just due to, availability, resources, just giving people a break. Because for a while you don't want to take a vacation if you're in the thick of it supporting your team members and their safety. But after some point, it's best for the team to acknowledge that. And if things are going to continue to, if you're going to be a resilient, sustainable business, you got to have people's well-being in mind. So just wanted to say that.
Great. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A here, but before I do that, I'm going to summarize. You guys are going to give me a thumbs up if I get it correctly. We got hard skills, technology, data analysis, being able to do the unstructured and structured data. We have soft skills, communication, presentation skills, cultural understanding, and we have experience. So if we're talking about building skills to navigate challenges, enterprise risk, and resilience, we got our hard, soft, and our experience. Did I get a thumbs up? I summarize what you guys did? Oh, look at that.
I think presentations, I think that is a hard skill.
Had to be the professor. I guess I got an A-. All right. Q&A. We'll open it up. Any questions from the audience? And we'll go through. Mr. Baker?
I just have a comment with regards to the technology acumen skills. So I hire cyber investigators and forensic investigators. And what I found over the years is I steal them from IT, and then I teach someone to be an investigator. Because I can't take an investigator and teach them to be a forensic or a cyber investigator. So I learned the hard way over years. So if you have the aptitude to be IT focused, then I would use that. It's a well sought after skill, and it's highly paid skill because there's not enough of them, and there won't be enough of them for a number of years. So we pay premium dollars for those skills, and yet still have to teach people some of the aspects of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. My experience, I came out of college into the operations world, did some work in targeting, so a lot of big data, analyzing where people are, building those networks. Because I had the CI skill, a few people, in the, within the organization identified that, I was able to build, pretty good book on people, and they said, hey, turn this kid into an interrogator, and they basically brought me along, trained me to do the skill set, the investigative skill set, and it made me into what, I thought was a fairly decent investigator. I think the U.S. government might agree with me. But I think it's that world. Like it was the opposite from a lot of the discussions that most people have. Like, learn the soft skill first. I learned the soft skill second.
Since many of you hire co-ops, you'd probably say yours. But when you think about students doing 1 or 2 co-ops that they want to explore and they want to figure out kind of careers and get skills, what kind of co-ops do you think that they should be trying to take on? What kind of opportunities are you hoping that they get on co-op?
Okay, just a note here. That's a very hard question. I think one of my observations, and this even goes back to when I was doing co-ops, is that when you're looking at different opportunities, like make sure when you're talking, really find out the types of things you're going to be doing. And I think you can validate this with Chloe and Jada later. I might be totally wrong, like over a drink. But sometimes in a smaller organization where you might not have, as many co-ops or as many people, you might get more opportunity to dip into quite a few different things a lot deeper. Because for us, like, we're relying on them, right, for doing a lot of things. So I do think, I know I did one co-op which was valuable, but like for the U.S. Senate, and I was so excited about it. But there was like 50 of us, right? And there wasn't as much opportunity for really deep learning because there were so many. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to add on to that. I did a work study with Boston Police where I filed fingerprinting cards. I did one of my first co-ops was with State Street at the Quincy office where I was doing badging, employee pictures and badging. That was just a 3-month one. And then I got into Gillette, and Gillette was it was a myriad of things that you could do. And I think I had to choose between that and a law firm at the time, where kind of some of the only kind of ones going was kind of police, law firm, and a couple of security ones. And the law firm one, again, to your point, it was like, we think we're just going to be doing these kind of transactional skills, this type of work on a regular basis, admin type work. And if you get that out of your interview and out of your co-op, it's probably not going to give you the experience that you want to get. If they kind of go, well, we don't really know what you're going to do, but this is kind of the stuff we deal with on a regular basis, and maybe you might want to listen to them a little bit.
This is a very policing specific observation, right? But I think doing a co-op that affords you the opportunity to work on the front end of the intelligence analysis process, and also for you to be involved in some respect with how that gets translated and used, right? So it's one thing to work in a crime analysis unit where you're crunching numbers and creating reports and running these predictive analytics, and that's all you do. It's another experience where you do that, but you also get to at least sit in the room where you see how that is actually translated into on-the-ground actionable strategy, right? Because again, I think that will give you an opportunity to understand exactly how do these numbers and data points get translated into things that actually impact people's lives.
Any other comments?
One additional point too. So before 9/11, I had a different plan for my life. I was absolutely going to become a lawyer, and I was absolutely going to be a prosecuting attorney, right? I wanted to work for the state side, right? And I went to my co-op advisor and I said, I actually want to work for the state's attorney's office. And he said, why? Because I'm like, I want to be a prosecutor. And he goes, work for the public defender's office. Learn the other side. Like figure out what build your skill sets by understanding everything that's in front of you. So I think that, if I could give any level of advice, try to find other things that you might not be interested in, but you can use your skill sets.
Pretty much echo what everyone said. I mean, I got a lot out of my crime analysis position. I think I learned, the skills of dealing with data. I also, produced reports for, shift change. The reports I produced then were just, on Word and like a one-page document. But yeah, I think in my other position, and one thing I would recommend is, are you going to be, learning skills, like can they tell you what you're going to be doing that potentially could help you get, used in your next job outside of the field? Or is it potentially a job? Back when I went, pretty much every one of my friends, got hired on by one of their co-ops. So that was a big, they were like, whoa, I'm going to learn these skills and then potentially I'm going to have the opportunity to get hired. I don't know if that's still the case nowadays, but for me, that was some reassurance, with job market, at least I know I'm going to get into a place that I've had time to know if I like the culture, people know me, I have skills that obviously apply to that position. So that was just something I thought of when I was going through, and would still probably think the same way.
Good question. Any others? Any others?
Something further,
Yeah.
and I'm glad we contributed to your success at State Street. A few of us noticed on our badge that we don't have a year on here because they didn't create years back when we were there. I look at these youngsters up here. When I graduated, we actually did have computers. It was called Fortran and Cobalt, and we did key punch cards that we had to bring to the data window. But what I'll say is, I wanted to be a police officer, and I came to Northeastern University to study to be a police officer. I was while I went to school. That was my co-op. I was a police officer. And what I found very quickly is Bob Sheehan was right. Everybody was a crime fighter at those times, and we didn't know about community policing. And my personality was not such that I could accept or be okay with the way that crime fighting was, as opposed, my personality wouldn't take it. So I went into corporate security and started as a third shift security officer with my degree. And what I'll tell you is I did every single job there is, and my success is about saying yes, right? Can you do this? Yes. Can you be a locksmith? Yes. Can you read plans? I'll learn, right? So I was in base control, I was a lead officer, I was a supervisor, I did investigations, I've done forensics, I've done technical, so I've done every job there is, so everybody that works for me basically knows that they can't pull the wool over my eyes, and I know their job as well as they do. And I think that's what you want to be, is you can have dedicated skill sets, but if you learn a little bit about everything, right? You master of, master of nothing, right? Jack of all trades, master of nothing. That's been my success. And I would say when you have opportunities, you may be surprised. I will tell you, I've never worked a day in my life because I love what I do, if you can't tell by me speaking. But that's what you want, is if you hate what you do, then you're in the wrong place. If you're there only for the money, find something else that you enjoy every day.
You said this wasn't going to be a Northeastern commercial, but I think it's turning into a Northeastern commercial. But I think I love the point because I think I heard from a few, like Rebecca, when you talked about going to Carnegie Mellon to learn a little bit about data and IT and tech, and I think most of us up here have kind of jumped different organizations, different jobs to kind of diversify our skill set a little bit. And even if you're in the same company, like you were talking about, just moving to different roles, taking on different tasks, I think that's kind of a little bit about that experience piece and diversification of experience set to propel yourself to be able to do kind of all of it at the end of the day, and later on in your career. And then if you're lucky to get stuck with a bunch of crises during the whole run, then you're really in a good spot, and they will continue to happen. So, any other questions?
So I am a third-year criminal justice and sociology student, and obviously with everything being said, data analytics and data-related skills are super helpful in this line of work, which I hope to go into. But with that said, I don't have any of these hard skills, data-related, and I mean, the curriculum is great, but again, it's very theory-related, and research and everything like that, which is great. But like you said, without, reorganizing my whole career and academic path in my third year, what would you advise that I do, non-academically on my own that I could teach myself?
I think I have a broader definition of hard skill than some of the other, then maybe my comments were later on, right? So if you took research methods, that's a hard skill. All right, so understanding how to isolate variables, understanding how to measure, like that is a data analysis skill. If you take in statistics, right, and that's a hard skill. And you're in your third year, right? So you're not graduating tomorrow, right? So if you feel like there's a couple of other hard skills you'd like to get under your belt before you graduate with your undergraduate degree, you still have opportunity to take electives, right? So if you wanted to, learn machine learning, or if you wanted to learn crime mapping, right, you still have the opportunity to do that, right? So I realized I probably should have operationalized my definition of hard skill before I went on my rant before. I've had a long day, right? So I've been talking all day. I did a 90-minute webinar first thing in the morning. I gave a tour to some potential PhD students. I ran a lab meeting, and I came here, right? So my apology. I should have kind of clarified what I meant by hard skill a little bit. You're learning hard skills as an undergraduate at Northeastern.
And you still have time to take a GIS class
Yeah.
in CJ, or the crime analysis class, or, right? So those are the kind of skills that we're trying to package for students. Sorry.
Yeah. I would also say that there's a number of, like ArcGIS or other, systems that, like Palantir, or do we still use Palantir? Some of these systems that are out there that you can do self-guided, assessments and get your own certificate by, going through the knowledge base by yourself, taking the class that's off kind of book, and then getting that certificate, and then you're ultimately certified in ArcGIS or Security Plus or some of these other things that are hard skills. Very good.
Or you could take Crim 6900 in the spring semester, which teaches you all those same skills.
Yes, you could do that too. Yeah.
You're still here. You'll be fine.
The other thing I would say is don't underestimate the soft skill of curiosity and just being curious and initiative, right? So I can't tell you how many people really still don't know how to use Excel that work for me. And they get annoyed because I try to tell them to put some stats together or put a graph together, and I can completely do it. And that's just self-taught. I just went and find out how to make Excel work for me and be able to use it as my primary tool to convince executives on everything we need to do at the company. So there's other things you can be doing on the side, not just all the the other big stuff we've talked about. Any other questions? Final remarks, Amy?
I just want to say a big thank you to the panel, not only the panel that's sitting here today, but I also want to thank and recognize the committee that has been actually helping us put this together. So not only are Rebecca and Ryan members of that committee, but Phil Denning, who's here, and Bonnie Michaelman, and Steve has been involved as well in that. Jack McDevitt, who's back there, has been leading some of those efforts, and Rachel San Giacomo, who has made all of this possible in terms of us having food and drink and marketing and just keeping us on track. So a big thanks to the committee. We wouldn't have been here without them. We hope you enjoyed tonight, and we'll stick around for some drinks in the other room. There's food, and I hope we'll give the panel a big round of applause and thank you.